get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone present here today. Welcome to this session of Apex Office as JPAC series on Flows for Apex, a comprehensive overview. In this session, you will learn about Flows for Apex, an open source BPMN 2.0 workflow system built for Apex for running Apex-based workflow applications. Today, we have an expert with us today, Richard Allen, who is a consulting member of the Apex product development team. Richard is one of the major architects and contributors to the Flows for Apex project since its inception in 2020. Richard first joined Oracle in 1988 as a consultant in UK. And then he worked in a variety of database security, PM, and marketing roles in California and Singapore. He has lived in Asia, in Singapore and Malaysia for over 20 years. He rejoined Oracle last year in the Apex development team and has been working on Flows for Apex and Apex workflow related projects. He is currently based in UK. Hear from the expert himself. Welcome, Richard. Over to you.
Thank you, Apurva. It's my great pleasure to tell you about Flows for Apex, and Flows for Apex is it's an open source BPMN workflow tool that we've built for Oracle Apex. And this was a project that started back in 2020 under the guidance of Niels de Bruin and some of the other team at MT Gamba, which is an IT solutions provider in Germany. And so we started an open systems project to build a workflow engine using BPMN for Apex. And I just have to read the usual safe harbor statement about Oracle future products and not making purchase decisions based on any future items that I mention. I should also mention that Flows for Apex is an open source project which has been produced by the Apex community, managed by MT. The software is released by the Flows for Apex project, not by Oracle. The features in Flows for Apex, are controlled by the project and not just by Oracle. So what I want to do today is to give you, first of all, a quick introduction to what is Flows for Apex. Then we'll start by building a very simple process model and then turning that into an application. Then I will talk about some of the more powerful capabilities to build really powerful workflow applications using Flows for Apex and Apex, and then talk about how you get started with this as a project. So what is Flows for Apex? Flows for Apex is a tool for building workflow-based applications in Apex. We use BPMN 2.0, which is the business process modeling notation, which is really accepted as the industry standard for process analysis and workflow design. It's a project built by the Apex community, basically because a few years ago we noticed that there was there are workflow engines out there using BPMN, but most of them really were designed for people building Java applications, and there's just this impedance mismatch between Apex and the workflow engine, and whereas Apex developers are used to developing in SQL and PL SQL and Apex, that kind of didn't work. It was quite difficult to combine the skill sets required for some of the other workflow engines. So in terms of software, Flows for Apex is an application that you download, and I'll show you the website to get that from later. And when you download it, it installs as a Apex application, and it contains a graphical process modeler, a workflow engine, an application for monitoring and managing workflow processes that are running in the system, and a set of plugins that you add into your application so that they can work with the workflow engine. And over the course of the presentation, hopefully I will be able to show you the components of that so that you can see how those pieces fit together. Depending who you are, Flows for Apex looks like several different things. If you're a business analyst, then Flows for Apex is a way to model business processes using the familiar BPMN graphical modeling notation. And so inside your Apex application, you can build this graphical model of your business process. And your processes can start off as a high-level process. And then as you evolve them to become an executable application, then you add more and more details onto the model and tell it how it interacts with the Apex screens and reports and components until you build an application. And the modeler and the diagrammer we use is an open source modeler called BPMN.io, which is well proven. It's very powerful, very easy to use. And we create the BPMN diagram in the modeler and then store it into the database. And we store it both as a BPMN file, which is a type of XML, and then we also parse it and store it in relational format so that we can run the workflows quickly and easily. If you're a developer, then Flows for Apex allows you to develop workflow applications Apex style. It's declarative development. We use SQL and PL SQL. We leverage everything that's in the database and in Apex. And you can either interact with the engine through PL SQL APIs, or in most cases, you'll use the plugins that we supply to just do everything declaratively in a very Apex way. I should mention two sort of technical things that give you a lot of help as a developer. So firstly, the system includes a process variable system. So process variables are pieces of process state or information or variables for the process that you need to keep for the duration of the process. And that means you can't really use page items and Apex items because they're only there for the duration of a screen or for the duration of a user session. So we have a process variable system for keeping process variables about an instance, and they persist for the duration of the workflow process. We have a set of things we call variable expressions, which are really before step and after step triggers that allow you to set these variables, to copy them, to go and do queries inside the database using SQL or PL SQL functions and expressions. And this allows you to go and get data from the database in the middle of your workflow process, which you can then use to steer the direction the process goes in. So you can route tasks to people based on how busy they are, whether they're on holiday. You can go and get information about things in the database and use that to control the workflow. And that's really powerful. And then the the other thing, which is a difference to using an external workflow system, is that because flows for Apex and Apex are all running in the same database, then we can make sure that they're transactionally consistent. And so when the workflow moves from one state, one process step to another, the database also commits in a single transaction. And for those people who have used external workflow managers, you'll know that there's a lot of complexity that comes from handling the cases where either the database commits and the workflow engine doesn't, or vice versa. Because everything's in a single database and in a single transaction, then you have transactional integrity between the application and the workflow, and that makes things much simpler. To the end user, they see a set of consistent workflow interfaces. So they'd see a task inbox, and we're able to reuse and integrate with the Apex unified task list that was introduced in Apex 22.1. With minor customization, then you can put your flows for Apex tasks as well as your Apex approval tasks into the task inbox. And then we can provide things like visibility to show a user what the current state of a process of a workflow is, which steps are waiting for people to do, which are done. And so you can create process visibility to the user. And because you're using standard tools, then you can have this consistent across all of the applications in your system. And then the other advantage for administrators and ops is that having these things in a workflow engine means that they can monitor processes. You can see where individual workflows have got to, where they're stuck, look for any errors, and it provides full logging, auditing, process performance management features with statistics and logging and auditing that are all available to you. Okay, so let's have a look at that in practice. Let's start off with a very, very simple workflow, and then I'm going to build on the detail in the model and build it up into a working application. And because we're fairly short on time, I'm going to start with a model that's already partly built. So this is the Flows for Apex process modeler, and I've built a very simple sequential workflow in here. It's a very trivial application. A real-world process would be more complex, and we can talk about that later. But basically, it starts with a user who's an employee who's got expenses that need repaying. He creates an expense report, sends it to his manager for review. If it's approved, then finance review it. It gets paid, and the employee gets an email. And so I can build this process, and then I can just simulate what's going to happen if I run this. So let me just save this. And now I'm going to go into my flow monitor. I'm going to create an instance of that process. So here's my simple process. And you can see that we've created an instance of the workflow. It's not started yet, so we'll start it. And you can see here that we've got in the right-hand panel here, we have a representation of the workflow, and the current task is identified in green. The completed tasks are in gray, so the start has happened. We now have the task to create an expense report. Now, when this is an application, this is all controlled by the application. I'm just running it in the console so you can step through and see the logic of the workflow. So when that task is completed, it goes to the manager review, to finance review, it gets paid, the employee gets an email, and the process is finished. Okay, well, that's pretty trivial. I can see some of the services that I get in the console allow me to see the sequence in which all the steps will run and timings and information about those. So let's go back now and modify this workflow and turning it into an Apex application. So I'm going to go back to the flow monitor, and I'm going to I've done a little bit of work to save some time. And what I've done is I've put my simple sequential process onto a set of lanes. And these lanes show who is going to implement each task. So this is you can see here, this is my expense process. And my top lane is the employee. Then I've got a manager lane, and then I've got the finance team who sort out the payment. So I've moved the tasks so that the employee creates an expense report, submits it to his manager. If it's approved, then it goes to finance to be reviewed and paid. And if not, it goes back to the employee. So let's now start making this into taking this from being a logical sort of model into a more executable model. Now, these BPMN tasks are just generic tasks, because actually this is what we call a user task. So this is a human task we want our user to complete. So I've just converted this to a user task. You can see the properties panel now has given me some more options. So this is going to be implemented as an Apex page, and I need to tell the workflow engine which application. So this is in my expense demo application, and I want it to run page 3. And that's all I need to do for this one. You can see that we're using the metadata inside Apex to generate this information. And in part of my call, I need to pass in the context for this application. And so I'm going to create 3 page items, process ID, subflow ID, and step key, which we are going to set into some application variables, some application items which I've created in the application. And I'm going to pass these 3 values from flows for Apex into the application. And when the application completes the task, it's going to send those values back so that the engine knows which task it was that's completed. So that's all set up. My next task, the manager review, this is also a human task, and I've implemented this using an Apex approval task. So I've created an approval task already in here, which is set up for an approval. And I've set up some actions and participant rules for that. So now what I'm going to do is to link that into my model. So I'm going to turn this task into an Apex approval task. So let's change the type here to a user task. And then find the task here. Oops, sorry. Oh, the wrong. It's an Apex approval. It's in that application, and that's the task. I'm not going to overwrite the subject that's already there. I need to pass in the business reference. This is the task primary key in the system of record. And then let's see what parameters the process has been defined with. I need to give it a process ID. So let's set that up, and that's already been predefined for me. And then the outcome from the approval, I want to return into a process variable called approval outcome. And so that's now all good to go. I now have an exclusive gateway here, which means that based on the value of a variable, that the process is either going to go back to the beginning if it's rejected, or back to or go forward. So let's set the conditions. So on this forward path, this is for when the task has been approved. And I'm going to set this as a PL/SQL expression. And the expression is where approval outcome equals approved. This is the outcome that the approval engine is going to put in that variable. Just copy that, and we'll create the other object, the other leg here. So when it's rejected, so when I get to this gateway, if it's rejected, I'm going to go that way. If it's approved, I'm going to go that way. And then I've got a step that probably wouldn't happen in real life here, which is the finance review. And this, again, is a user task. This is going to call an Apex page, which I've created already in the application. And I'm going to pass the process ID, subflow, and step key into the page. I also need to create one more process variable I'm going to pass in, which is I want to set the ID item on the page to the business key. Which I can substitute using standard Apex sorry, let's clear the cache on that page. Now, payment to employees. This is actually quite a complex process that involves dealing with the bank and whatever, and somebody else has already set this up for me. So what I can do here is I can just call another process which has already been created. And so I've got this, this is what BPMN calls a call activity. And I've got another diagram somewhere in my library here, employee payment process. I want to use the latest version of that. Now, what variables do I need to pass into that? It's telling me I need two variables. One is the payee name, and I'm going to set that as using a query, and I need to select the name. From flex expenses. No. And I'm going to bind in the business reference. So we can bind process variables into my queries. I can validate queries. And then the payee amount again is going to be a number, and I can select cost from flex expenses where oops. Right, that needs to be a PL/SQL expression. And then I can use the editor and validate it. I have a problem. That's because it's a query, isn't it? It's not. Sorry, excuse me. That's a SQL query I need to do. And then here's my query text. That validates okay. So that's all set up. And then my email employee task, this is what BPMN would call a service task. And I can choose either to write some PL/SQL or send mail. And if I use mail, I get all of the variables to define a mail message, and that uses the Apex mail functionality and Apex templates. Just to save time, I'm just going to put that in as a piece of null PL/SQL. So now I should have an executable model. Now my so let's go to my application. And first of all, I'm just going to log in as Scott. This is just the emp table as a series of cards. I'm going to create an expense report for myself. So on the 13th of September, I took a flight and I went from Singapore to KL in economy on AirAsia, and it cost me $230. My expenses submitted. Now, Scott's manager is Jones. And so if I log in as Jones and look in his tasks, you can see that he's got a task here, which is an approval task, to approve that expense item for Scott. And this is using the Apex approval task. We just controlled it inside a process and flows for Apex. So let's go ahead and approve that. And this is where I realized there's one thing I didn't do earlier. So let me just go back to my process model. And let's just change the model. One of the things about lanes is I can define who gets these tasks. And so this finance review, for the task assignment, I want to assign these. I can assign them using a query or a function to anybody in the organization. I actually want to I want to send this to the clerk in one of these teams who does the expense processing, who's Miller. So that's saved. Let me go back to my process and let's just create another flight for Scott. This time let's go from Hong Kong to Bangkok on Qantas, and that's going to be about $350. Which, sorry, I need to do that as Scott. Sorry. Okay, let's have another flight from Bangkok to Sydney. That's going to be about $600. So Scott's done that. It's going to go to his manager, which is Jones. And you can see the task here. So that's the task I just created. Let's approve that. Now if I sign out, now I sign in as Miller. You can see that she's now got a task. This is not an approval task. I've got a process viewer in here, so I can kind of see what happened. So this process is now on this step, which is why it's come to me, and that's the route it's come through. Obviously, on a trivial example like this doesn't tell us very much, but on a complex workflow, it's very useful to be able to see, where in the overall process a task fits and what steps are still required to be done by other people. So I can come into here, complete the task, which now steps the process forward. And if I go back to the console, we can see here's my $600 flight, and it's gone all the way through the process. From the management console here, I can click on any object and I can see the configuration for that task. So this passed in process ID, subflow ID, step key. It was an Apex page on this application, this page. These are the events that happened. There weren't any errors. There weren't any variables set on here. If I look at this a call activity, I can actually drill in. Sorry, if I click on here, I can drill in and see the sub-process, or the process that was called as a call activity, and the path that the process took going through there to execute things. So I can drill down in my process, I can hide the detail and expand it when it's required. And if I just show you all that we needed to do to this review expense payment form, this was the standard form. All I did was to add a button, a complete button here to complete the step. And then I had to add a new process in here. So this is the process that's used for the normal DML processing to update the database. I added another step in here, which is to complete the workflow task. And this uses one of the Flows for Apex plugins, the Manage Flow Instance Step plugin. And I just had to configure that to say this is where to get the process ID, subflow ID, and step key. And what I want you to do is to complete the step and have that tied onto when server-side conditions, so when the complete button was pressed. And that's all I needed to do to take that form and turn it into a process step. So we've turned our workflow into a basic application. And in 50 minutes, I don't have time to go through the whole of Flows for Apex. But what I want to do is just show you some of the more complex things that you can do, because real business processes, are a lot more complex than our simple expense application there. So this is a model of a aircraft parts supplier with a sales department, general manager who approves things, a group who do export paperwork and documentation, and then arrange shipping, and then we have a multi-level approval. And so once all of the details of how to implement this order have been finalized, it then gets approved by the sales guy, then gets approved by the general manager, and then finally signed off by the compliance manager before paperwork is shipped to the customer, and operations pick, pack, and dispatch the goods to the customer. This is a demo that I did for one of the global office hours back in September last year. And you can see this if you look at the replays of the Oracle office hours presentations in the What's New in Flows for Apex 22.2 video. So if you're interested in Flows for Apex and want to see another demo of how something more complex is put together, go and watch this video, and it'll take you through this process. You can see here we have a workflow that goes into parallel. So we've got groups in different parts of the company working on the overall workflow in parallel. So while export compliance are doing this paperwork, the shipping guys are organizing this, and then the parallel bit comes together, and everything waits for all of these things to be done before we then go through an approval cycle and then do some other things. So if you're interested, look at that demo and you'll see how we put that together. And there's a lot of things that we can do in BPMN. BPMN is a very powerful business process modeling tool, which is why it's become the global standard and is widely used, both by business analysts and the business side of the company, as well as IT. And it gives them a common way to communicate between the business and IT. And some of the things we can do in here, I'm not going to go into lots of detail because I don't have time, but we can have sections of the model that execute in parallel. We can have sections that where multiple parallel streams can occur conditionally. So some of the parallel paths happen, some don't, based on some sort of condition. We can have event-based routing. So in this part of the model, this is called an event-based gateway. And following that, there's a timer and this task and another timer, or it could be a message receive event and another task. And the way that this works in BPMN is that whichever of these events occurs first, that becomes the only path forward, and the other paths are cancelled. So you can use this to implement timeouts and sort of waiting for multiple things, and when the first of them happens, that's the only thing that the way forward. We can split into parallel paths and then resynchronize. So we wait for all the parallel paths to finish before we proceed. We can add timer-based waits and delays. We can simply add a reminder to a task. So this task here was a user task. And we've put a timer on here, which when it fires, will then send a reminder email to the user if this task hasn't completed. We can have timers that do a timeout. So if a process hasn't completed by a certain time, so this is a timer, this is a timeout timer. And if this task gets completed within the time, then the workflow goes in this direction. If this task isn't completed by the deadline, then the workflow changes and it goes down this direction. We can have termination events. So this event, if we move to this terminating end event, that causes the process to terminate. We can have sub-processes. We can have error handlers. And so inside this sub-process, if this event is executed, actually, this is an escalation. This causes an escalation to occur and this processing to then happen. We can have an error end and a separate error handler defined. We can run script tasks. We can send email. We can use business rules tasks to make automated decisions. You can hook those into machine learning models. We can assign due dates to tasks. We can do priorities, and we can do task assignment. So there's a lot of fairly complex things that you can build into a model to model the complexities of real business processes. Just to highlight a couple of those. So we saw this in the demo. This is a call activity. And so here's our model. And this step is a call activity. You can see this broader, wider line on the outside. And this actually calls another model, which is defined in a different diagram. And it passes variables in, executes this, and then returns, just like calling a procedure would in PL SQL code. You pass variables in, do some work, and then you return a value. We had, in the last release of Flows for Apex, we started to introduce message flow, and this allows formatted messages to be sent or received from a process, either as an event or a task. And this allows you to model the interaction between multiple processes. So in this case, here is my process, my shipping process. It prepares the order, and then it sits here waiting to find out that the payment has been made. And there's a different process that's being modeled in a different diagram or in a different system, or it may be the bank send a REST call in, and then when the message is received, not only is the content available to the process, but it also means that the process steps forward onto the next task. And we've done some early work for message flow in 23.1, which gives you some basic message flow capabilities. And we plan to develop that further kind of in the next release. Here's an example of one of those event-based gateways where you either wait for an event to occur or for a timer to fire, and that implements a timeout. So that's event-based gateways with messages, or you could have a receive task and have a interrupting timer on it to do task-based timeouts. Now, in the example, we showed the integration of an Apex approval task. And those of you that follow Apex on Twitter and in social media, will have seen sort of pre-announcements about Apex Workflow, which is a feature coming in Apex 23.2, subject to all the safe harbor statements. So how does flows for Apex and Apex Workflow fit together? What's the difference? When do you use one or the other? So let me break that down into a couple of components. So first of all, with the workflow components that you have at the moment, which is the Apex approval task, you saw in my demo how we can use an approval task and call it from a flows for Apex workflow. And so you can use this pre-built, easy to create tasks, and you can control it as part of a workflow. If you wanted to do a multi-level approval, you could do that, and you define the conditions and the task assignment for your multi-steps of your approval as part of your BPMN workflow. If an approval is kind of one step of a much bigger workflow, then again, you can use the Apex approval task and build it into your workflow, as I did in the demo you saw earlier. And we can also use the flows for the Apex unified task list, which you have today, and with some minor configuration, you can use that as a task list for your user for both approval tasks and flows for Apex tasks. Now, as we go into Apex 23.2, Apex is going to have some native workflow capabilities, and these will evolve, over future Apex releases and become more sophisticated and more capable, over the next few releases of Apex. So what does this mean for flows for Apex? Well, the Apex workflow is native to Apex. It's got some really nice tight integration features in there. It has its own diagrammer for graphically creating workflows. They're not going to use BPMN. It's a simpler diagramming concept. And so we believe that there are many enterprise customers who have either got an investment in BPMN or a requirement to use BPMN because of standards compliance, for whom Flows for Apex will make a good choice and will continue to be a good choice, and other customers who will want to use the simpler inbuilt workflow that we're producing in Apex. And our goal is that these two should be able to live side by side, that you should be able to start an Apex workflow from inside a BPMN workflow. You should be able to start a Flows for Apex BPMN workflow from inside an Apex workflow. So as you know, while I spend most of my time working on Flows for Apex, but I'm in the Apex workflow team, we can keep those things together and in sync, so that you have the choices of which you want to use. Flows for Apex today has been in production use at quite a few customers now for a couple of years. We don't know, because it's an open source project, we don't know all of the people that are using Flows, but we are aware of at least 50 projects where it's being used, and quite a lot of those have been in production for a year or so more now. You can the Flows for Apex API is REST enabled, and for more details of that, look at the last Apex office hours presentation. It includes quite a bit of logging and some elementary process statistics capturing, which we put into the last release, so you can start to see how long tasks are waiting for people to do something, etc. Now, having spent 20 years out in Asia, I know that Asian language is important, and so we have translated Flows for Apex into all 10 of the Apex development languages, and we now support Japanese, Korean, simplified and traditional Chinese, as well as English, French, German, Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, and Italian. And we know that we have one big customer in Japan who's using this, and has been for about 2 years. So then, to wrap up, how do I get started with Flows for Apex? Go to the project website, flowsforapex.org. You'll find the documentation for the product there. You'll find links to download software from our GitHub repository. There are tutorials, documentation on the concepts, and as well as how to use it. There are several partners who have been quite involved in Flows for Apex, including MT in Germany and InSum in North America and Singapore and France, who have been involved in creating Flows for Apex and have done several implementation projects. So if you need help, consulting help is available. And my final plea is if you're using it, please let us know what you're doing. It's always useful to know what people are using Flows for Apex for. Tell us what you like. Tell us things that you don't like or things you'd like to be added to it. And either tweet that to Flows for Apex, or you can tweet it to me at FlowQuestR, or if it's use information that you don't want public, feel free to email me at richard.allen@oracle.com. So with that, I think we still have a couple of minutes left. Let's take any questions.
So Richard, I took care of them while you were talking.
Okay.
As agreed.
Good.
If you have any more questions, I think Richard will take the questions live.
Feel free to email or tweet questions.
Thank you, Richard. I think that was a great overview session on flows for Apex, and those are some interesting enhancements in the latest release. So feel free to reach out to Richard. And also, I would like to thank Moritz, who joined us early in the morning today to help us with the Q&A. Before we conclude this session, I would like to bring to your notice the new training and certification that we have launched from the product team. So we have two learning paths. First one is the Oracle Apex Foundations course, which is a fundamental low code which teaches you the fundamental of low code application development. It's just a 3.5 hours of video training delivered directly by the Apex product team. You can enroll for free by visiting the link on the slide shown. And what's more is you will also receive a badge from Oracle on completing this course, and you can share it on social media. If you would like to take this course on LinkedIn Learning, we have it available on that platform as well. The second course is the Oracle Apex Developer Professional course. So this is a soup to nuts course covering complete low-code application development in detail with Oracle Apex. This has 13 plus hours of expert training delivered directly by the Apex product team. And you can also practice these concepts with the hands-on labs that we have developed. To enroll for this course, you can go to apex.oracle.com/go/professional or scan the QR code on the screen. Once you complete this course, the next logical step would be to take up the Oracle Apex Cloud Developer certification. So, while it is not mandatory to complete the Oracle Professional Developer course, we highly recommend that you complete the course since it has great influence on the certification exam. To register for the exam, which Oracle University is providing for free until September 30th, head over to apex.oracle.com/go/professional and register for the exam. If you are a partner or a customer attending the session, and if you would like to come and present in one of the sessions, please reach out to us. Or if you are an independent developer who has built a cool app using Apex, we would love to see it and also share it with the community. Reach out to us and mail to us any topics that you are interested to see in the upcoming sessions. If we have been conducting the office as for JPAC region from past few months, and if you have missed any of the sessions, you can head over to the YouTube playlist and you can watch the recordings. And these are some of the useful links that you can visit for all the resources of Apex. Apex.oracle.com is a one-stop for all things related to Apex. So make sure to bookmark that link. And finally, I think we have reached the end of the session. Thank you, each one of you, for joining in today, and stay tuned for the upcoming sessions. Follow us on social media to stay updated. Thank you again and have a great rest of the day.